What's up, Bitcoiners? Pardon the 1 minute late. I'm not usually late, but I have a good excuse. I have a great excuse. It's not that the sun didn't come up. The sun was up. We were ready to go. And it's not that Bitcoin wasn't running. Bitcoin's running. We're good. It was that I needed the coffee. I needed the coffee, right? Because now that we know the sun is up and Bitcoin's running, all that's left to do is have coffee and talk about what's new. I realized a minute before, my wife said, "Are you going to fake it?" And I said, "I can't fake it. I can't fake having the coffee. It's not the same thing. You got to have the coffee. The point is to have the coffee together, right? You can drink whatever you'd like. I brought water as well. You might need some water, right? Have a sip of water. So I went through the work of finding the fakest news I could find. It's a hard one today. There's a lot of fake news out there. There's a lot of fake news. Bitcoin Graffiti says coffee, indeed. That's what it was. Maybe you were guessing about why I was a minute late. Ni hao from Kevin Opar. Good morning from Daniel. And Bud says morning, team. So, as I said, it's not easy today on this day to find the fakest news we could find. I got one pretty good one, but it won't be the fakest one because I said it's a lot running. So everyone talking now about COVID and everyone having new takes and what's going on. This is some news that this person decided to actually say out loud. They said this out loud in English language, right? And it's not from a major news outlet. That's why I couldn't give it the fakest news of the day. But still, this is the way some people talk. So this is a healthcare magazine. And their headline is, "Combating misinformation as a core function of public health." That's the headline. That it's actually misinformation that's keeping people from core health. It's the misinformation, right? And I think they're right. It is an information problem. We're going to talk about the information problem more as we go. I don't know if it's fake, but it's the inverse Kramer. It was confirmed yesterday again. So Jim Cramer a couple of days ago screaming, "Good chance again to get out of crypto and scale out of Chinese stocks, as neither can be trusted." And CZ points out, this is just too accurate. Cramer posted this on January 9th, the day before Bitcoin went from 16,000 to $20 US. So inverse Kramer in effect. So it's so fake that the inverse rule just works. We should use the inverse Kramer for almost every. Better off using inverse Kramer for most things in care, all that other stuff, as we've seen. But it's almost impossible to beat the actual fake news of the day. The actual fake news of the day is just another realm of fake news, right? Kramer is a paid shill. So horrible, Bitcoin Graffiti says. Again, remember the old NBC theme here, right? We like the NBC theme, right? NBC theme is just, it explains a lot, right? It explains a lot. But here's the fakest news of the day. It's almost impossible to compete with this. I mean, there, like I said, with the story on that, combating misinformation is the core function of public health, right? So basically brainwashing good. It's impossible to beat this headline, though, just because the status of the outlet. It's the Washington Post. They're the regular winner of the Moscow Time Award of the day. And the one they have now is all, everyone talking about the Biden Corvette protocols and the Biden docs. And as we've discussed here, the whole interest that we have in the Biden docs is the prediction that it's part of a plot, more or less a plot, right? A narrative forming plot in order to induce Trump back into the game, almost to excuse him, right? Well, this guy did it and that guy did it. We didn't raid Mar-a-Lago before an election. Right? We didn't do that. Right? We'll do it to the other guy too, right? There's no deep state here. We'll get everyone. We'll treat them all fairly. And it looks like the White House is definitely losing narrative control because, indeed, the media is picking up on it. We talked yesterday about a whole group of articles on CNN. But here's the way the Washington Post takes the cake, right? So it's not just that they're covering it, right? It's not just that there's now bad headlines about the Biden White House and people finally talking about all this stuff. It's the following. they're not content with actually just doing the job and slanting Biden. This is how you know this prediction that it is about a controlled demolition. We're still not confirmed on this. This is still what we say on this show. This is controlled demolition. It's a way to also blunt the argument that you're in the bag for one party or one team. And so their headline is, "The Biden document scandal is a test for the media and an opportunity." So here, the whole point is for them to now go over, does this, about how successful they've finally been in correcting all their problems before about misinformation and not covering things correctly. And this sort of leaves out the context of the whole Hunter Biden documents. They never really covered that, but this time we're going to get it, right? They didn't ask any questions about the Mar-a-Lago time. They still haven't asked any questions about 2016. So now they're going out and just saying, like, this is it, right? This is exactly where they're meant to be. So the way it looks is the article can be summarized by their own tweet, which came with it, right? So the Biden document scandal is a test for the media. That was the title. Here's their own synopsis. Journalists labored to contextualize a matter made all the more complex by the shadow of former President Donald Trump's own ongoing classified document scandal. And they gird against partisan criticism, and they are going too hard or too soft on the story, right? So this whole thing, like, wow, the journalists are mega heroes. They're so hard done by, but they're getting it right this time. Now, of course, the point of what we're going to talk about today and why this thing misses the mark is the whole thing is about headline control and which headlines you actually want to focus on, right? What you actually promote to be the news, the narrative, and all of that stuff. And, you know, we know this is a problem. So let's look into this just for a second, and then we're going to compare and contrast a few things about Biden and the headlines they haven't chosen, right? They've chosen these ones, but what about the ones they haven't chosen? So Schellenberger gives a pretty good breakdown of this whole case and what's going on with the Biden docs. And he says, you know, at first they said Biden, so this is what Schellenberger is doing in this thread, is covering the way the news has covered the Hunter Biden docs so far, right? So he's pointing out the coverage. And he's responding to this article that I just mentioned about them giving themselves so much credit for finally getting it right. Their big opportunity, right? Their big opportunity. So he says, at first they said Biden fessed up right away. He only had a few top secret documents. The VP can declassify them. Now they admit, we don't know how many top secret documents he had. There's no evidence he ever declassified them, and he didn't fess up until he was caught. Over the last week, journalists at all of the major news outlets wrote explainers claiming that the evidence definitively proved that Trump's alleged crimes were gargantuan, whereas whatever Biden had done was probably just a gigantic misunderstanding. Now they're backpedaling. It turns out that Biden knew that the mishandled documents as early as November 2nd, 2022, just before the election, and kept it secret until the news organization forced the Biden administration to fess up. It's now clear that we don't know how many classified documents he had, but it's all based on false assumptions. And now the New York Times says it's clear that the VPs can legally declassify. It's not clear, pardon me. And now the New York Times says it's not clear that VPs can legally declassify documents. Whatever the case, what is clear is that Trump has claimed that he declassified the documents, whereas Biden does not. Remember that whole, like, again, this was always all document control boringness, right? And when Trump even said, I can just think them, right? That's a, like, sort of a legal threshold. At what point does Trump have to show his intentions in order and express his intentions about the classification of some documents or another? People wondering about the president of the United States' capacity to either classify or unclassify documents, right? So again, it was a complete bungle, and we know for a fact now that this contrast of headlines can't explain all the other headlines that haven't been approached, pursued, and things like that. Like the Hunter Biden case, how could this excuse never even asking the right questions about the Hunter Biden case? How does this excuse still bringing on the 51 confirmed liars for more interviews, even though we know there are 51 confirmed liars, right? The folks who signed the Russian disinformation note back in 2020. But here's one of the best ways you can actually tell about this narrative choice, right? So think about the Hunter Biden case again. You know, what has Hunter Biden done that's morally not great and is legally recognized, and it's not just innuendo, it's that he's got one of these illegitimate children with a stripper, I guess, right? I don't want to spend too much time on the details. I don't really know all of them, but I know he had a kid recently with this woman. So somewhere out there, Joe Biden has, for real, a granddaughter he won't acknowledge. I mean, for real, right? The president has a granddaughter he will not acknowledge. Now, I don't want anyone to have to get into people's family lives here and all that, right? So I'm not actually saying go find out about the granddaughter and what Biden thinks. That's not really the point. What I'm trying to express here is that the name of the game here is choosing headlines, and which are pursued and which aren't is the main point of the story. That's the important part. When things are decided on and focused on, and when they are not focused on. So remember, Biden literally has an illegitimate granddaughter that he refuses to acknowledge, right? Through the son, through Hunter. What would have happened? You know, we ask this a lot, but what would have happened had this been Trump? Right? Trump had one daughter who wasn't part of the two main wives situation, a woman that he even married, Marla Maples, his second of his three wives. And he had that daughter, Tiffany. And how many articles were written about her place in the White House, and he's embarrassed by her and shunned. I mean, they tried to create every story about it. And did he not acknowledge the daughter? Of course he did, his whole life, right? Was he married to the mother? No, but we're not here to judge morality. Again, it's just a question of which headlines were chosen at that time and which ones are chosen now. And when you contrast them and you compare them, you start to understand what's going on, right? You can even think of it this way. Look at the COVID thing. We're talking about health, and we're going to talk about health more in this show. We started off talking about health and misinformation and guidance and what's going on, right? So how about this one? This is from Shipwreck Show, right? 2 years ago, they couldn't wait to tell you how many people had died. Tickers and death counts on every news station and front page of every newspaper, 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. Today, people are dying suddenly everywhere, and we hear nothing. Now, again, we're not we're not pushing the died suddenly documentary on the show. We don't know anything about that stuff. We've seen people die of heart stuff for a long time before. We're not saying the vaccines don't cause it either, right? We're saying nobody knows anything, right? Now, I definitely want people who could know to look into all of this and figure it out, but I'm not holding my breath on getting definitive answers around vaccines, COVID, or tomorrow. As long as we live in a world that we live in with the incentives we live in around healthcare and other things, it's just going to be misinformation piled on top of misinformation. Yesterday's show was all about predicting that long COVID has to be a real thing. It has to be. There's too many economic forces incentivized to continue propagating this over time. There's no way it's going away. The cognitive dissonance required to make it go away would break people's brains. So we can't predict it's going to happen tomorrow because of logic, right? We've said it on this show before, the Ben Shapiro thing, facts don't care about your feelings. He has it 180% wrong, and he always has. Feelings don't care about facts at all. Zero. They don't matter. They don't affect anything. They're irrelevant to the way people feel about stuff. And people will continue to feel the way they feel about COVID. And as we see, that sort of transmutes regularly into climate change, morality, and virtue signaling, and all those things. We see the connection, right? But these are feelings that are completely unaffected by facts. The facts don't matter. So remember that the way they're contrasting the coverage of the document management scandal, right, has choices made behind it. That people made choices before those things were decided upon and put into sections on CNN and headlines on the Washington Post, right? So they'll always be treated differently. And the kids, for example, comparing an illegitimate kid to all the kinds of troubles in Trump's personal life, which don't amount to anything like that, like an unacknowledged child. It's pretty major, right? It's pretty major. Especially when we know the child, it's real, right? This isn't just like rumors of a kid, and the kid would be real if Joe just acknowledged it, right? That's not what's happening. The courts have acknowledged it. The paternity tests have acknowledged it. This is real. As far as I understand, fact check me if I got something wrong there. There's a possibility I got something wrong, possibility. But that's my understanding of it. And speaking of Trump, a story running around Twitter right now. We're going to keep on this theme of headlines, but I got to mention this one because it is really neat. So someone asked the Chat GPT thing for Donald Trump to explain Bitcoin, right? And I've talked about it before, but I got to read it again. It's great. Bitcoin is a big deal. This is Chat GPT explaining Bitcoin in Trump's words. Bitcoin is a big deal. Trust me, it's the biggest, most amazing thing. No one knows money like I do. America is going to love it. It's a currency like no other. It's going to make America great again. It's a digital currency, big numbers, and it's going into billions and billions. They say it uses energy in billions and billions. They say it uses energy. That's fake news. Energy is good. Energy is fantastic. More energy it uses, more secure it is. The more secure than a wall, like a wall that keeps getting bigger and bigger. It's a great thing. Believe me, folks, you don't want to miss out on this. China does not like it. China does not like it. They banned it. It's going to make America great again. It's pretty accurate. And you forget just the special way that Trump talks when you don't hear him so often and going on in the way that he does. And, when you think about what that means, the wall, that's so funny. Yeah, it's like a big wall. So, but what it makes me think about is the expression "Make America Great Again," right? And he puts in the context of China and what's going on with that. But again, the way I think about Bitcoin and Americans and America is really the theme of World War II and World War III, right? I've said it on this show several times. America won World War II. Americans lost. I mean, we've been talking about health this whole show. Look at them. Unfortunately, look at them. They're not a healthy group of people. Not healthy. Cernovich put that in context, right? Saying, Daniel says World War III is an information war and an economic war, right? And an economic war. And it's been going on for a long time. Indeed. I psychologically joined the ranks of World War III fully in 2015 when I started to really order my life around Bitcoin. I was a professional in Bitcoin since 2013, but it took a bit of time in order to, you just have to work through it. I'd already given up a lot of the fiat trappings, but I still hadn't taken the psychological plunge. And when you do that, you realize you're already in World War III, and so I did. So when you think about winning World War II, it's the American institutions that won. It's the Federal Reserve. It's American global police force. It's America global jurisdiction for every single field. I mean, look what they did to Arthur Hayes in Hong Kong. Right? He has no American clients. The business is not based in America, and still the Department of Justice found a way to get over there and get him. And I think he did as much as he could have to get outside of the yoke of this. But American jurisdiction, just like their taxation, is global, right? Global taxation for Americans, global application of the law in all fields all the time. The unipolarity of American hegemony, right? It's a real thing. And so they won, right? They won that. Even the UN. The UN is a scam in the sense that it was just set up for America to hide their influence, and they used it as best they could while it was still useful. It still lives. America finds no use in it anymore. That's why it's as stupid as it is, because the leadership that would have come from America is just no longer there. But healthcare is one of the great examples of looking at how Americans lost World War II. So America won World War II, Americans lost, right? So everyone else got higher caloric intakes, everyone else got in the world, which is great, right? We wanted the rest of the world to not die of starvation, so overall success. But what ended up happening yeah, that's the apocalypse. So that's the apocalypse thing again. Unveiling done when you get Bitcoin. Yeah, with what you said in 2015 and World War III. Yeah. You just you realize the game you're playing at a certain point, and that it's not about getting richer or being right, or it's not even about it's more just about like the side of the world you get to push the energy towards, whether it's good or bad, right? The chaotic world we're in today versus a more predictable and pleasant world that we're working for, right? So once you see that, and once you see the forces you're up against, and they're not even really logical, as we've said here, like feelings don't care about facts. So you're up against just feelings, right? So once you realize that, yeah, it's the paradigm shift. And just as proof of American lack of health, right? Zuby Music said this: Big Pharma has USA by the balls, right? This is the spoils of war. Spoils of World War II produced this. Big Pharma has the USA by the balls, both major parties and the whole mainstream media and medical establishments, right? Other countries too, but USA worse by far. And Cernovich says, right, Big Pharma's power is due in large part to people's eating themselves into disease and then needing drugs to treat these conditions, not to mention America's Adderall addiction. Demand, which is poor health, created the supply, right? So the demand created the supply. And that's, more or less where the United States is at, right? The United States is at this time, and they've got these problems now, right? They've got the runaway economic conditions that are so complicated, and central bankers and Wall Street and commodities and betting and all these other things. And then you've got the health thing where you've got psyops coming in dropped daily from news organizations who are the main sponsors of corporate media because they buy up all the ads. Who watch news for 10 seconds and see who's advertising, right? You'll understand who is in control of that agenda pretty quickly. It doesn't take long to figure it out, right? And like I produce events for the Bitcoin industry, and even within our aligned world, you still hear it from sponsors. We want this, we want that, right? Even if you give them conditions and say you can't do anything if you pay this money, right? Eventually they still get to spend 5 minutes trying to convince me of something, right? So imagine how much worse it is with much larger numbers and much larger sponsorships and much more inventory to sell. We've got a couple booths and some space and some stuff like that to sell once a year, right? This is and people's entire marketing budgets and strategies going to these mainstream media channels, right? So it's a totally different game. And the problem that the fiat system has, though, and the advantage that Bitcoin brings to make Americans great again, is that the simplicity of some of the truths that Bitcoin can lead you to take away the confusopoly and those crazy conditions that we've inherited from this complex web of health, right? In the end, just like everything to do with our economic situation can be simplified with the elegance of Bitcoin instead of the huge amount of engineering, health isn't really not that much different, right? Health, a lot like what Cernovich pointed out here, became so complicated because the unhealthiness became so complicated. In the end, to be healthy, just like to save money, should require a low IQ and not too much effort and work, right? It's eating right, it's moving for 30 minutes a day, cutting out soda, right? Cutting out massive amounts of sugar, focusing on the basic things that people love to eat and are delicious: steak, eggs, beef, proteins, right? These are the things we cherish anyway. And you can train yourself into loving if you're not putting science experiments in your mouth constantly. Like if you're putting an actual science experiment, Coca-Cola, like it's not food, it's a science experiment. It's not real, right? If you're dropping that into your mouth, you're gonna have a real misunderstanding about nutrition and health and all those things. But that's the good news, right? Bitcoin, just like it's spreading financial literacy of the project, spreads this nutritional literacy. And Texas Slim and the Beef Initiative, which is doing great. Even in my own life as a Bitcoiner, I've learned way more about the cuts of meat and how to prepare each and where they all come from on the vague interest in some of this stuff before, right? I knew what an expensive steak was and where it came from. I had some general idea of the animal, but nothing like I do now. And you can see that kind of information spreading amongst Bitcoiners on Twitter regularly, right? nothing to do with the coins, just people talking about it, people interested in the animals, the grazing, their health, their happiness, how that health and happiness can translate to your own health and happiness. So Bitcoiners taking that individual aspect of nutrition to its extreme, and really helping pivot to a World War III win, right? So World War III wins begin with us personally understanding financial literacy, with us personally understanding nutrition, with us personally understanding just how programmable we all are, right? Myself included, yourself included, all of us are susceptible to even the types of media narratives we talk about every day here, right? The Gelman amnesia effect spares nobody, nobody. None of us are immune. Unfortunately, we have a very faulty memory system as it is, and will always be biased towards narrative, to the things that confirm our own presuppositions and all that kind of stuff. That's the operating system. We can't choose that part of it, but that's okay, right? You can filter out bad information, garbage in, garbage out. It's the same thing. If you can find a way to reject this stuff, you're going to be fine. Oops, pardon me. Some kind of warning. Bud says, never thought it like we are in an actual war, but you're right. It fits. It feels like energy and beef fighting Greta and eat bugs crack. Oh, and it's probably never going to get into a hot war, right? I mean, in locations like Ukraine, I don't want to say that without acknowledging what they're actually going through today. There's some misery, hot war stuff happening. But I don't know, and I can't say for sure 100% it's not going to engulf the planet. The potential is certainly there. There's enough stupid people, is what I'm saying, right? I'm pretty sure there's enough to get this thing rocking and rolling. But the good news is it is psychological, and most people inherently know something's wrong. They can feel it. It's in the air. It's in the ground. The energy of the planet sort of lets us know, right? Whether it's just how frequently we can connect with strangers and not be put off by them because we notice some sort of programming that would make them hostile towards people, right? And that's all around us right now. So that's complicated and makes things, sort of not easy. But the good news is, right, we can understand it from a personal responsibility point of view, and that's how we can help win World War III and make Americans great again, right? It's things like not paying your taxes, finding creative ways to get out of paying your taxes, not funding that machine. That's what makes global taxation of Americans so insidious and so terrible for our war efforts, right? It's one of the worst things we have going, and why it's so important that the conversations in DC are even happening now about getting rid of the IRS. Remember, historically, the Federal Reserve and the IRS, Social Security, taxation system were born together. We have to kill them together. They can't coexist in the future either, right? They have to go away together. Now, by killing the Federal Reserve, maybe there is a period where there is something like a Federal Reserve and it's got a new role. I predict it takes over the whole UBI movement, the whole real political money, like money based on policy objectives. I think that's where it's headed, and we're probably going to need that, right? We're probably going to have to be able to take care of a lot of people out there that look at all these fake news journalists, as we've been talking about on this show so far, right? The cognitive dissonance coming for them will break their brains. We can't expect anything of them next. Taylor Lorenz is going to be incapable of work in just a few years, incapable, right? But I want her to be able to live a happy life going forward, right? I don't want her to be miserable. I don't want anyone to be miserable. So we gotta think about, and even if it is the bugs, if they can brainwash themselves into liking the bugs, then I'm okay with it, right? I'm not going to stop them. Just like the everyone in Canada these days arguing about. I don't want to talk about this too much on a Sunday morning. It's a little dark, but I'm serious. All this stuff in Canada about the assisted suicide and, oh, it's a tragedy. Now, I'm not for writing laws by governments to be able to do what they're doing. I'm definitely 100% for people choosing to do it, though, 100%. And if all these people who are miserable and not optimistic want to do it, You know, like, I don't think they're going to be Bitcoiners tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like, okay, if all of you fiat people who can't imagine any future tomorrow being better than it is today, if you really are that much of a pessimist, I can help you with Bitcoin. I can help tell you that the world is great and beautiful. But if you can't see it on your own, you might not be. You might not, right? If you don't make the choice yourself to do it, it might not happen. And so, who am I to say what you're to do with your life, right? But the numbers are. I don't hear any Bitcoiners doing it, is I guess what I'm saying. And it's an unfortunate mindset, but it is a World War III mindset, right? It is. And I pray for them, and I hope that they would see the optimistic future we're all sharing on this show and in our communities, and all the good food that's coming, and all those other things that are happening. Right? We're not out there trying to put some kind of a doom lens on the world we're building. Right? You can go to the WEF, which starts today, for that. Right? We don't do that at our show in Miami. It's all optimism. Right? All optimism. But if someone wants to make that choice, that's the world we're in. I'm not going to stop them, because individually we have those choices and responsibilities, and they're before us. And I have a lot of empathy and hope for the best for these folks. But the answers are there, and it's up to us to embrace them, and that's how we win. And if you look, the tools are there for individuals to make those choices to participate in the victory of World War III. And the other thing that's happening is those American institutions, the ones that managed to win World War II, suddenly looking really creaky, right? Really weak. Think about this one, right? You've got, what was one of the major foreign policy doctrines of the history of the United States that predates World War II? It's the Monroe Doctrine. It's one of the original founding foreign policy directions of America. And what it means is, very simply, and it still applies, I believe, is that no foreign power shall influence the affairs of America. And by America, in this definition, they explicitly mean Alaska to Tierra del Fuego. They mean Argentina. They mean the whole thing, the Americas, right? The Monroe Doctrine concentrates attention to the continent and says no one shall influence the continent unless America says it's okay, right? And everyone in the world knows this. Right? This is as old as maritime law in the world, right? This is 100 and something years old. I mean, I know there's much older maritime laws, but this is at this point unwritten, but everybody knows it, is what I'm getting at, right? This is a form of ancient law at this point. It doesn't need to be written down for us to get what they mean. But what's happening on our continent? Well, here's in the midst of everything happening in the world and changing polarity and all that stuff, this is Maduro in Venezuela saying this out loud. I discussed it with Lula, right? The Brazilian guy, two other, Petro and Fernandez. A new hour is coming to unite peoples of Latin America and the Caribbean to form a powerful bloc, building the community with a shared future that our brother President Xi Jinping says. And this is from Li Jingjing, so Chinese state-affiliated media for sure. But this is the president of the second largest oil reserve in the world on our continent, on the North American, South American continent, expressly saying their shared future with the Chinese president. And William Middlecoop responds, a new hour is coming. Venezuelan President Maduro speaks about China's efforts to form a powerful bloc in Latin America and the Caribbean to create a multipolar world. Of course, this would be against the dollar-centric thing. And this is, of course, BRICS starting to form. Right? This is BRICS starting to form. So you've got Monroe Doctrine being actively ignored. Actively ignored at this point. Actively ignored. You've got countries that have been involved in sanctions that haven't gone through. Right? We know Lula in Brazil is heavily connected to China. That's not news. Right? He's a friend of China. So all of a sudden, you've got all of this stuff, right? You've got now this huge debt burden, which continues to grow, right? You've got the debt limit which is going to be an obsession this week, and everyone's going to be talking about it. But in the meantime, the thing that would sink it, like an alternative to US dollar demand, this BRICS 2, is happening right away. The alternative to US dollar demand is way more deadly than the debt limit, because it actually takes away the mechanism by which they can artificially grow the debt limit. Well, it doesn't erase inflation, but that's devastating for people. So, they're going to go through all this stuff this week, and it's going to be all pageantry, right? It's going to be all pageantry and political pageantry about this and that, without ever acknowledging the real stuff we were talking about with the Hunter Biden, and now it's the document control case, right? They'll focus on one story, document control, but ignore the entire context around it, right? They could have written the article about fixing their reputation with regards to the Hunter Biden scandal to begin with, about suppressing the documents. They did not. They chose not to, right? So this is all pageantry, this whole debt limit argument, and they're going to do it. And right away there, you can see an important contrast. I saw our favorite leader, Bukele, yesterday announcing the Miss Universe actual pageant. The actual pageant is going to be in El Salvador next year, from America to El Salvador. So while they're going to have the fake pageantry, which will probably destroy America, but help Americans win World War III, happening for the next little while in America, but the actual pageantry, which is about healthy living, right? We saw the Bitcoin El Salvador woman this year with the big thing and the Bitcoin stuff, right? Everyone saw that. Everyone saw the trans person, I think, this morning saying, this pageantry thing is going to be all about health and beauty and all these things, right? We embrace that. We embrace it entirely, right? Pageants, I think, are the perfect place for competitions for trans people. And if El Salvador can host a show that is purely about pageantry, right? And they leave the money pageantry to the thing they have no idea about and just say, go Bitcoin, right? Because that's the way it should always be, right? They should just take the coin off the shelf, the canned monetary policy solutions that have been built by Bitcoin, right? Don't try and put on like you can understand it, because you're just going to be putting on a pageant, right? All the pageantry of fake science, of fake economics, fake economists, all of that is, if you're going to be someone like Bukele, focus on the real pageants with the women and the trans and the beauty and the niceness, right? That's much better. It's way better, right? And health, right? These people are the types of people that can promote healthy living and physical health, right? I don't think all of them are. I think psychologically, a lot of them are pretty screwed up, right? But, maybe not going forward, if we're able to focus on pageants for what they really are and not confuse them with other pageants like in economics, then maybe it'll all change, right? Maybe it'll all change. But that's where we're at, right? We've got America institutions, things like threatening Matt Taibbi, right, for not being American, right? People threatening him now for being un-American, for talking about the things he's talking about. We have an actual congressman coming out and calling him a Kremlin talking points reporter. So American institutions are rise, right? But Americans getting more and more powerful. You can even see it spreading. That's my last story for the day. Of all places, right? Germany, of all places, right? Running on their mainstream news yesterday, a story about how Bitcoin, well, not national, local, pretty mainstream, about the benefits of Bitcoin for developing renewable energies, right? So the virus is spreading viral and mimetic, and you're going to see way more conversations about energy literacy provoked by Bitcoin, right? It's going to be right in the middle of all the energy conversations. It's going to be right in the middle of all this BRICS and what's going on with the dollar and demand, and our economists really stupid, or we don't know. It's going to be in the middle of all of that, right? In the middle of all of that. So that's the good news, guys, right? And then it's going to be in the middle. There's no one cutting out for anyone else. Was I cutting out? Yeesh. Sorry, guys. I hope my audio is okay today. Let me know. I hope not. I was speaking a little low today, though. That could be it. That could have been it. Joe says, happy Sunday. Right? Yeah, that's the Bud, right? Never thought like we're in actual war, but you're right. Yeah, it fits. Yeah, it's a war, guys. It's a war. Me too. But you hear everything. It's just delayed. Here, let me reset it. 1 second. All right, might be a little better now too. I'll re-listen to see if I got it right today. All right, team. I don't have too much more this morning. Let me know if I forgot anything. We'll talk about Brazil maybe tomorrow a bit more. Bad sign that Lula's on the phone with the Maduro folks, but conflict is good, I guess. All right, team. Peace.